Doing marketing in the future is going to be about understanding what's going to differentiate you and what's going to distinguish you. We have to recreate the data structure of the internet in a way that's going to make it AI ready. If I'm not gathering, curating, and using data as the first thing that I'm doing when it comes to how do I execute my marketing, then I'm behind and I have to catch up quickly. It's using the data in a way that we've never been able to use the data before, and it feels really intimidating. My biggest advice to revenue leaders is use data to figure this stuff out.
Before we jump in, let's talk about something wild. The future of sales isn't human, it's AI. It's Piper, the AI SDR agent. Piper is the #1 ranked AI SDR in G2. She works 24/7, follows up with every lead, books meetings, and actually knows when somebody's ready to buy using signals, autonomously and at scale. Piper's not just replacing repetitive tasks. She's helping sales teams refocus on high-impact work, like closing deals and building relationships. Hundreds of fast-growing go-to-market teams, including leaders in the GTM fund community, are already using Piper. Learn more about AI SDRs like Piper at qualified.com. That's qualified, QUALIFIED.com. This bonus episode explores one of the most important shifts happening in go-to-market right now, the move from optimizing for humans to optimizing for AI. Mike Walrath, CEO of Yext and former founder of Right Media, which was acquired by Yahoo for $850 million, shares why this change is as big or bigger than the first wave of digital transformation. This clip is from my full conversation with Mike. All right, let's get into it.
All these things have to be, in effect, we spent trillions of dollars on IT, software, and services in order to create the digital presence for human beings. Great, amazing, awesome. It was created a ton of really interesting businesses and business models. And now we're going to have to replicate it all. And we have to rebuild that entire digital presence now for machines because they don't want to consume it the same way that human beings do. They don't want pretty pictures. They don't want drop-down boxes. They don't want navigation fields. What they want is pure, unfiltered data. And in a lot of ways, that's a lot like what happened in 2009, only 10x or 100x bigger. We have to recreate the sort of data structure of the internet in a way that's going to make it AI ready.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the network. And so the network of different search engines is expanding, and Google's share of search might be a little bit further down, 2 to 4%. More Gen Zs are using TikToks, ChatGPT is handling hundreds of millions of weekly users. What does that look like from that diversification? Are there certain network channels that you would advise operators and startups to really pay attention to?
Yeah, so I'd advise everybody to pay attention to a couple of things. So the first thing is you referenced the fact that Google search share has started to erode. Interestingly, the way that's measured today is really just against the other legacy or traditional search engines. So what's not being taken into effect in those studies is the impact of ChatGPT or Perplexity or Grok or any of these other generative AI platforms because they're not being measured that way. So all that's happening there is there's a little nibbling around the edges where Bing and potentially Yahoo or others are just eating a little bit of Google search share. And that to me feels like the stabilization of the monopoly can get to 92%, but it probably can't stay there. And so I think that's what that is. What's not being measured today, but we're starting to get some really interesting signal on, is the fact that if you take a much broader definition of search share and you say just, where are the questions being asked and the answers being provided, that would include then ChatGPT and SearchGPT and Perplexity and Grok, Gemini, Google's own AI experience. And what's happening there is you're starting to see traffic patterns that show that a lot more of the referral traffic on your web properties and also the indexing or kind of bot traffic coming from those services are all increasing. And so what that tells you is that the questions are being asked much more broadly than the pure search share would measure.
That makes sense. And how should SaaS companies rethink their marketing funnels with that in mind?
Yeah, so I would go broader than SaaS companies. So I think every SaaS company probably has a different ICP and a different target. And there's a whole set of things that SaaS companies need to worry about right now, which is how much of this kind of agentic shift is going to commoditize or make it more difficult to sell my tools. I think that's a whole different discussion. The way we think about it from a marketing standpoint is any marketer who has a product or a service, or whether it's financial advisors, dentists, doctors, retail establishments, anything that has a local lens on it has to be very alert to the fact that all the rules of how is your product, service, advisor, dentist, doctor, practitioner being discovered are changing before our eyes. And there are two shifts to that. One is fragmentation. It's no longer just what does Google say about my business and what am I doing to make sure that I rank on Google. It's also what do the generative AI engines say about my business? What does ChatGPT say? So there's in that is rank or prioritization, but there's also sentiment. They tend to express a lot more opinions than Google does. And so in order to focus on that, what businesses are going to have to understand, especially anybody with a local lens, is that the answer is going to be very different depending on which street you're standing on. You take any major city, right? And if you are looking for a cup of coffee and you start walking around the city and you start asking all these different services, hey, ChatGPT, where's the best cup of coffee near me? ChatGPT is going to know your location. It might know your preferences. It might know certain things about you, just the same way that Google does, the same way that Perplexity or Grok or whatever your sort of experience of choice is. As you walk around that city, the answer to that question is going to change, right? This is nothing new. This is because the interface is geo-aware. The question is, how is that service or that experience identifying what they should be surfacing as the answer for you? And what can go into that is a nearly infinite set of data points that are both around you in the memory of the device and of your prior searches and of questions or things you've told it to remember. Remember that I like vegan food. So even if you don't say I'm looking for a cup of coffee at a place that also serves vegan food, ChatGPT or Grok is going to say, well, I know you like vegan food, and here's a cafe that has great coffee, but also happens to have vegan snacks. And I think that's the big paradigm shift that we're going to see, is that it's not enough anymore as a marketer just to say, well, this is my location. Here's the reviews and ratings around that location. And here are my hours of operation and expect to be found. You have to go deeper and deeper into the core data of your business. And then you have to figure out, how do I distribute that data in a way that the AI bot or the AI agent is going to decide that this is where I should send Sophie right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because whatever your ICP is, right? So if for that, for a coffee shop, it's going to be presumably people who drink coffee, right? And so they're going to think in terms of, how do I make myself most attractive to people who drink coffee, depending on all the different things. So what gets really interesting is, from a marketing standpoint, you can actually start to reverse engineer a lot of these things using data, right? So for example, if I'm a startup coffee shop located in the neighborhood that you're walking through there, and I'm facing stiff competition from 10 other coffee shops within a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk of where I am, one of the things I need to understand is, what are they doing in order to create visibility and presence around their business? We're living in a world that's changing really fast. And some of the things that we're helping our customers do is to gather those competitive intelligence insights at a level that's much more granular than anything they've ever had before. So what you can do now is and we have a new product that does this. I'm not here to pitch products, but it's a really good example of how this works. You can actually take real search data across all these different platforms for very specific queries to your business, and you can aggregate it up across hundreds of different variables. And those variables can be things like distance, which is really important, but there's very little you can do about distance. But what you can do things about is, how many reviews do I have? What is the rating of those reviews? How many photos have I posted to my GMB page? How fast does my website load? How much data is on my website? How consistent is the data that I'm distributing across the universe? And literally there are hundreds of these things. And then you can look at it and you can pull the same information for your business and for all of your competitors. You can then, because of the power of our ability to capture and parse and then analyze tons of data using AI, we can pull that all down and you can basically find the distinguishing characteristic. So for example, you might find that the reason why one of your competitors is ranking more highly than you are is because they've created these highly content-rich intent pages around certain menu items, right? So they have a vegan menu, and they have a keto menu, and they have a make up your whatever fad diet to short. They might have 20 different menu pages that are part of all they've done is they've taken the core authoritative data around their business, and they've expressed it as a web page. The next step will be, now it's not enough anymore just to build a web page. You should be taking that same data and you should be converting it into a pure data file. And it's unclear exactly the way we're going to do this. You have things like model context protocol and various kind of text-based ways of delivering pure raw data to AI bots and experiences. And so at the end of the day, doing marketing in the future is going to be about understanding what's going to differentiate you and what's going to distinguish you. And that's always going to be some form of content. And content is always going to be some form of data in the way that we think about this sort of brave new world.
And you, in a way, Yext has really mirrored this evolution naturally by nature of the product. What's next? If you could pick up that magic ball, how are you thinking about that at Yext, or even just your personal hypotheses?
Yeah, so we're thinking a lot about that because I think a lot has been made about that AI will be the end of software. I think that's far too simple. I don't think that's the case, although I do think that there's a lot of cases where AI is going to challenge software, vertical software tool sets and things in terms of what is the value within the organization. What I think is clear or becoming clearer is that super intelligence is going to be the top layer. So if I'm not gathering, curating, and using data as the sort of the first thing that I'm doing when it comes to how do I execute my marketing, then I'm behind and I have to catch up quickly. And that means I need to be able to take my business data, I need to be able to structure it. Then I need to be able to compare that to my competition. And I need to be able to understand what are they doing that I'm not doing, which then what does that do? That creates more data, right? So that menu pages example we talked about, there could be service pages, there could be product pages, there's infinite ways. And I'm using pages as a proxy for structured data creation, because then what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, we need social media posts around our vegan menu pages. And we need reviews that specifically review response capabilities that specifically talk about every time I respond to a consumer review, I'm creating more data, right? I'm creating data that's really consumable by AI agents because they're going to say, okay, well, like here's a negative review about the business not having a vegan menu. And then a response from the business saying, actually, we do have a vegan menu and here's a link to it. And I've now created content that bot can index and say, okay, like I now understand that this business has a vegan menu. And so anytime I get a question about a vegan menu, I can recommend this business. And those are just like very simple examples of how this whole world is going to shift and change, which means you have to lead with the intelligence because the tools, right? The thing that I just described involves a bunch of tools. It involves building web pages and publishing those web pages in ways that's a tool, right? It involves responding to reviews and understanding that you have negative reviews or positive reviews and you should respond to those. It involves syndicating your data effectively. Those are all tools. But what makes those tools really powerful is the AI superintelligence layer that you can talk to. And you can say, okay, hey, I'm number 2 in my category for my geography for XYZ search query or XYZ topic. How do I become number 1? Or I see this new competitor who showed up a month ago and they've risen from number 12 in the category to number 3. I need to protect myself from them. And what you need is this kind of, think of it as like this army of intelligent agents who are out there pulling your data, figuring out, okay, this is the thing you need to do. That's where this is going. And software companies who figure out how to deliver intelligence first are going to be the ones who thrive in this world, because what they're going to do is they're going to eat a lot of the services market, which is a totally different market.
Yeah, those silos are disappearing. And with the advent of more tools, what does that do from a headcount perspective?
Yeah, so I'm not a big believer that this is a huge destroyer of jobs. I think what this is a huge changer of jobs. And I think what we've seen with technological shifts is that it's always a huge changer of jobs. And so funnily, Uber was supposed to destroy all the taxi jobs, right? I promise that there are more drivers in every city today than there were 10 years ago, right? Now, maybe now the current thing is, well, Waymo is going to take all those jobs away. And maybe that's true, but other jobs will be created. So I think what happens when we get the intelligence layer right and the tools are more automated, then the work that we do as marketers or marketing operations folks or strategists, it all gets up leveled. So I spend a lot less time doing keystrokes and figuring out, okay, I need to go get a developer to make a bunch of pages that I can publish about all these different things in my business. And instead, that's tool work that happens behind the scenes. The amount of time that's going to be spent really analyzing and understanding what is the thing that I should do next is going to be. And I'll give you a real example of this. So a lot of our customers, they have thousands or tens of thousands of like unique local presences, right? So you could take like some of the largest fast casual restaurant chains or some of the largest wealth management and insurance businesses out there. One of the fascinating things that we're seeing as we aggregate all this data is that the strategy for discoverability and digital presence can be fundamentally different for two locations that are in the same town or within 5 or 10 miles of each other. And so it's like things become remarkably bespoke, where you might take a pizza restaurant that's 10 miles away from another pizza restaurant, and you start looking at the data and who the competitor is and how they're competing, and the prescription for improvement or protecting a great presence position are completely different. And so we go from one size fits all. The type of things that we see today is, okay, we have 3,000 pizza restaurants in the United States of America, or maybe globally. And our big initiative for this year is to increase the reputation score of all of those entities. That's the kind of thing that we've been working on as an industry. What happens next is you realize that of those 3,000, there's only 1,000 that actually will benefit from a higher reputation score, either because they already have a high enough reputation score or because they just don't have any competition. And so you wind up with a world where you can have bespoke marketing recommendations for each one of those stores. So the person who typically was running around store to store going, hey, you have to give everybody this card when they check out, or show them this QR code so that they'll leave us a good review, is now able to say, there's only 300 stores out of 3,000 that need that. But there's another 300 who need more photographs. And so I'm going to work with them on that. And so their work changes, and it becomes much more value add and bespoke as the tools automate and the analytics get better. It's using the data in a way that we've never been able to use the data before. And that feels really intimidating, because if you ask a human being to go through that data file and identify, well, which store needs reputation work and which store needs photograph work and which store needs local pages that load faster, that's an incredibly manual and incredibly difficult process to do, that's done in seconds with the right data structure and the right AI.
And how do you think that lends itself specifically? Let's take a Series A, Series B software company. Do you
Yep.
think that we can get as prescriptive?
I think that what's going to happen is going to be somewhat evolutionary, in the sense that companies who realize that what I'm really talking about here is reversing the way that we create products. So if I think about the way, so Yext, I invested in Yext in 2008. I became chairman in 2010. I was chairman for 12 years, and then I've been CEO now for 3. And it's been some really interesting ride. And if you think about the way we were developing product in 2009 and 2010, which felt incredibly innovative, is we're identifying these kind of sectoral trends. So we identified that, hey, mobile fragmentation is going to create a huge problem for marketers. We need to build a platform, a set of tools that allows the marketer to put their authoritative information in once and have it pushed to hundreds of endpoints. That was the sort of big innovation that we created. And so it was problem yields tool. Then what would happen is we spent 10 years making that tool work better through workflow and just making it more seamless and able to do more things and scale. And we automated all the connections out to the endpoints. We automated all the connections to all the sources of truth inside a business. And so it was really easy to get in this world where you're just innovating through this sort of problem tool workflow. And then the customers, they always want, well, give me some analytics and give me some ROI proof. And so you built that as like an afterthought, right? That was really the sort of the reporting data layer and the intelligence of the thing. I think what's going to happen in this next generation of SaaS is we have to reverse that. And we have to start with the data. So we have to start by saying, okay, what's the data that's capturable, right? So if I want to optimize my social media presence, instead of starting with, well, here's a great tool that lets me post to all the different networks and automates a lot of that, and here's a tool that lets me create a lot of great content, where I would start with that, and where we're starting with that, is instead give me the data give me hyper localized data around what the sentiment is around the social posts that we're making, right? Then what I can do is I can understand from the data and from that kind of the intelligence that can be drawn out of that data, what's the thing that needs to be built? And it may be that hyper-localized posting is the thing that needs to be built. And so you work backwards from the analytics and the ROI layer to the sort of the outcome you're trying to create. And then because so many of the tools and so much of the workflow can be automated, you don't need nearly as robust an investment in the tools and the workflow. And I think that's really how the innovation curve in software is going to change in a really big way from the way, I mean, when we built Right Media, go back even further, 2003, we were trying to automate this auctioning of media, which in a lot of ways today is just, it's like electricity. It's just every ad impression on the web is being auctioned at some level. But it was like a huge leap, and you had to create all this like complex workflow around how you entered a bid and how that bid got changed and shifted and dynamic pricing mechanisms. And now all that stuff is like fairly commoditized. And so I just think that's the thing that like early stage software companies are going to need to focus on is, are we starting from the right place in order to focus on the right thing, which is going to be the value driving for the customer more than like building workflow tools for the sake of building workflow and tools.